Hi, this is Jenny, and this is the podcast Bisaya in America. So I'm going to talk more about Corona. So this episode is Corona 2.0, coronavirus. We thought that we had left coronavirus behind last year when everybody got vaccinated, or we thought everybody got vaccinated this year. We thought that we were ready to put it behind us. But just like any movie, there's a sequel. And hopefully it's not going to be... I don't know if you've seen or you watch the Fast and the Furious franchise, but I think they're on 10, I think. So hopefully it's not like the Fast and the Furious sequels where there's 10 or who knows, a dozen of them down the line. And hopefully this Corona is really going to wane and disappear, or maybe it's going to become part of our life, but it's not going to have this big an impact, meaning like we would have less severe disease, or we would have a cure hopefully by next year. So I started this year a little hopeful, but I knew that just going by history, the Spanish flu, it took like 2 to 3 years before things were back to normal. And I think it was like the impact was less severe after 5 years, and then eventually after a decade, and of course after 100 years people forgot about it and didn't prepare, and here we are. But that is, people are just bound, and humanity is just bound to repeat history unless they learn from it. So my experience with Corona, so I had it last year in July of 2020. So who cannot forget 2020? Everybody will remember 2020. So anyway, I was working in a facility. I'm a healthcare worker, and I worked in a long-term care facility, and sometimes we would get skilled care. And anyway, what happened was we were very careful, and at that time we had no idea that it was airborne. So, but I was following what I thought was droplet contamination or droplet infection. So, the face shield and the masks. We did not have N95 masks until maybe June. But the start of the pandemic, March, I remember, I was working in another building as well, and they just gave us, I think actually it was May that they started handing out face masks, but it was literally like just the flimsy surgical mask that you see everywhere right now. It was that. And not only that, because we had a shortage, we actually had to use them. That whole face mask, that flimsy face mask, had to last us a week and sometimes 2. So we would have to recycle. And it's only meant to be worn like 3 or 4 hours max. And it's really just... it doesn't really protect you from the virus as much as you would like, because as we found out later, it was airborne. So the Corona is actually airborne, so it means it's that type of face mask, that type of mask doesn't really protect you that much. Maybe psychologically you think like, oh, I'm protected, but no. So that's why a lot of people were getting sick. So anyway, I remember my experience. I think it was a Monday, and we had 1 or 2 patients that suddenly went to the hospital. I think they had started Corona symptoms, and I remember that Monday, Tuesday, I started getting like rashes or hives, and it was unexplained. It was really, really itchy, and then we were laughing about it, and we were calling it in the office, we were calling it as corona rash. And it was actually a sign that I was already starting to come down with the corona. So around Monday, we had patients that went to the hospital, and by Saturday, I was just feeling down. Like, I felt like so weak. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sleepy. I'm so tired. I can't explain this. But I actually went out because I didn't know. I think at that point we were only tested once. I think June or July. I think we were tested once, and then I remember that we didn't really get tested that much until after there was like an outbreak in the building. I think it was after there was an outbreak. We started testing, I think, once or twice a week. And it was pretty bad. It was like, it was done at that point, the virus had penetrated. And it's just a rumor. We can't really confirm this, but we were told that patient 0 was someone that was working in the building and wasn't really a healthcare professional. That person really worked with healthcare professionals, but wasn't a healthcare professional and wasn't really following precautions. And for some reason, because we had temperature checks, that person was able to still go through. I don't know if that person was as symptomatic at that time, but we were told that person attended like a public gathering and didn't feel well and didn't really wear the mask and like started coughing on the patients. And then when the patients got infected, we got infected. Everybody just got infected. It was a mess. And anyway, I was down and out for supposed to be just 2 weeks, but then they extended it to 3 weeks because they said, oh, you're still tired and you have shortness of breath. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna have shortness of breath for a while. And it actually is true. I had shortness of breath for several weeks. And you know what's so weird is they don't test you. At that time, they said, oh, if you test positive for COVID and you were out for, in my case, it's 3 weeks, but you're out for more than 14 days. When you come back, you don't necessarily have to be tested again because they're just going to assume that you still have the virus, but you're not going to be contagious. So that was their belief. So looking back, that was kind of like, how do you know that the person's not contagious? And then I was just curious to know, like, am I still testing positive after 3 weeks? But unfortunately, they wouldn't test me. And if I got tested, I would have to do it on my own dime, which doesn't make sense, and which was kind of weird too. I didn't get tested. The building suddenly got tested twice a week, and then for 90 days, I didn't have to go through that, which was like, yeah. So I could still have been had the virus in my system, but they didn't care, or they didn't care to know that I still had it. They just wanted me to go back to work. And anyway, I asked for compensation and they said, you're a contractor. You don't get anything, not even workman's compensation or anything like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I tried, but yeah, just one of the stories. Like, unfortunately, some people, they get sick, they don't get any compensation, and it's just all bad. It's just all bad. And anyway, I thought I was okay. I thought I was recovering. But then, like several months later, I started developing hives. It was like, it started really mild at first, and then suddenly it just started getting weird. And I would go to the urgent care, and they would say, oh, that's just, allergies or something. You could be allergic to something, we don't know. And they pump me with steroids. And then after a few more weeks, I come back because like I'm covered in hives again. And then they would pump me with steroids. I think they did it 3 times, and they prescribed like allergy meds. It never worked. And I went to 7 doctors, or 1 physician's assistant and 1 LPN, and the rest of them were medical doctors. And they all, like, they just said, like, one doctor just told me, like, oh, you have something like possibly caused by a virus. So I took like antiviral stuff. Didn't work. Someone told me, a doctor told me, oh, you have a fungal infection. I tried the cream, didn't work. It came back. It's like boom, like overnight I was covered in hives. And then they had all sorts of things, and I said, oh, it's an autoimmune thing. And I'm like, no, it's not. And I was really suspecting, like, could this be COVID? Because one of the first symptoms that I noticed was that I got the rashes, really itchy hives, before I got full-blown COVID. And then luckily I found a doctor, and he was like, yeah, there's no way to know really, if this is because of the COVID. And he said, we're just going to treat it with injections. So I have to take monthly injections now. But I signed up for a study in November. I'm going to be in a COVID clinic, and hopefully they can help me. And I'm supposed to have my blood drawn. I signed up for something. I have to look at the email again. I don't want to pay for anything. It's like too much. I'm just spent so much money just uncovering this. And I think I'm part of a study, but I'm going to see and check if I would have to pay for the kit. And they said that the expense is going to be on me. I'm like, what? I'm supposed to be part of a study. It should be free or something. I'm going to sort it out. I'm going to look at the email because, yeah, it's just a mess. So the thing is, I've been educating people about the coronavirus because I have met people, and some of them are my friends, and unfortunately, they do not believe that coronavirus can be bad. And they think like, I actually have one friend, and she told me, and she comes from a state, let's just mention like a state that doesn't really believe in the coronavirus. And it was just kind of weird because I was talking to this person, and I told the person, hey, I got it, and this is what I got as a result of it. And to have someone just stare at you blankly and say like, doesn't make sense. It's not registering. It's just blank stare. And I said, this thing is real. I'm not making it up. And I have pictures to prove it. I had rashes and like severe hives, like really, really severe hives after I got the corona. And I've just have not been the same since. I have, for months I had tingling in my feet. And then, fatigue, that's the normal thing. I guess when post-COVID, they call us long haulers. And anyway, to just have someone stare at you and not believe any word that you're saying, and it's just pretty bizarre. People, unfortunately, I know that each and everyone on this planet is entitled to their own beliefs. But the thing is, the intelligence in the universe, you could call it God, you could call it universe, divine intelligence, whatever. We were given, or we developed mental faculties in order to make sense of our world. And we live in a physical world, a physical reality, which means we are bound by laws in this physical plane. So let's say you choose not to believe in gravity and you jump off a building without anything, without knowing about air, like flight or like that. Wind resistance, you don't use a parachute, you just jump. Unfortunately, you are gonna not survive that if it's like really, really high elevation, let's say from the 100th floor, you are not going to survive because we are bound by physical laws because we have physical bodies, therefore, but the intelligence that is permeating this reality that we have, it knows, or I don't even know what to call it, but anyway, we have mental faculties so we can make sense of our physical reality. That's how it works. But people choose to believe what they want to believe, even if it doesn't follow the physical laws anymore, the physical laws that they are living in, the physical plane. They're just like, okay, I choose not to believe in it. I'm exempt. But unfortunately, as long as you have a body, you will be affected by this. I actually was, I replied to someone's social media post. Someone posted like, oh, this is all propaganda. This is not real. And I'm like, dude, I mean, this is not propaganda. I had it. I know for a fact how contagious this thing is. And unfortunately, we had patients that passed away, and I saw it people are saying like, oh, it's not real. Like they could have died of something else. Like, how would you explain people dying in 1 to 2 weeks after testing positive? If you believe in correlation, if you believe in logic, so what could have been the cause of their death that they died one after the other after testing positive for COVID? And also, I was pretty sick with it. And I know that if I was not super healthy, if I was not very physically active, I would have been a goner, It was pretty plain to see that people who have pre-existing conditions, they will most likely not survive it, especially if it's like chronic conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and the like. And I just found out like a few days ago that I do have a pre-existing condition, because I thought like, oh, I don't think I have a pre-existing condition. So that's why I had moderate symptoms. And I have a thyroid condition, which unfortunately is also considered a pre-existing condition, and that could affect your outcomes as well. Having like a thyroid condition is considered a pre-existing condition because it can also affect your outcomes, meaning that you might have a severe case of COVID. It can contribute, but it's not one of the top 3. I think, strangely enough, aside from obesity and hypertension and diabetes, I think anxiety is actually one of the top 3s. Anxiety and having OCD can actually result in someone having severe COVID, which is really interesting if you think about it. And someone in my group told me that, because that's a correlation of the body and the mind. We don't know how OCD and anxiety, they can actually reduce your immunity and your immune response. So because you're always in that state of stress. So stress, as we all know, we release hormones called cortisol, the stress hormone, and the stress hormone can affect our immunity. So very interesting indeed. So anyway, I try not to go into arguments anymore with people that don't believe that any of this is true. I, for one, I know this is real, and I know this is contagious, and I know COVID is bad, and I know people personally that have gotten it and have not survived it. And we have family, friends. I had patients that didn't survive it, and it's like, and that's the thing. People are saying like, yeah, 80% of the people survive and 20% don't. But that's the thing. Do you know if you're going to be one of the 80% or you're going to be one of the 20%? And you could have someone like me that does survive it, but can have lingering symptoms even 12 months on. So that's the thing that they're not talking about in kids too. Children are getting infected, and they said, oh, children are going to survive it. Yes, they might most likely survive it. But the thing is, will they have lingering symptoms after? So that's the thing. It's the, what are the effects? So I know there's a vaccine hesitancy and people are afraid. It is kind of like it is an experimental vaccine per se. And there are side effects, but you have to look at it at a risk gain. You have to assess it. What's your risk and what is the gain? And the gain is possibly not losing your health, possibly not losing your life, or possibly not getting severely ill versus the risk. And one of the things, side effects that I noticed, aside from, my arm wasn't functional for basically a week because it was really sore and I had like chills for 2 hours. That was my side effect. But another side effect that I had was that after maybe 2 months after the vaccine, I started having heavy periods, and they said that this can also be one of the side effects. So it's really, really heavy clotting and like menstrual bleed, and it has slowly it has gotten better, but that can be one of the side effects as well. So we really don't know. But the gain is like, because I went through COVID and I know it's pretty bad and it continues to be still pretty bad. And I was just thinking, like, if I get this again, will my body will be able to take it? So I took the vaccine because it's just risk gain. In normal, I wouldn't have taken the vaccine, but one of my friends, he had COVID in April of last year, and he got it again in November. And before this happened, I was like, I'm not going to get the vaccine. I'm already immune. But then it might be true that it does wane. Your antibodies wane. And you just look at it at a risk gain. And speaking of risk gain and mitigating risk and analyzing your risk, so there was like, I went out with people that were not vaccinated and they got COVID. And so one of them was like a family. It was like kids and husband and wife. So they were my friends. And I told them, hey, I've been vaccinated. And hey, I already got COVID. And so, but I was really uncomfortable that they were like, because they came from another state, which was not very open. And here in Texas, it's very open. Like literally, it's like the corona never happened, even if it does continue to happen. People are in like a state of denial. But anyway, I knew my risk, and I was, I'm not putting myself in more risk than they are because they are not vaccinated. They were not vaccinated, and they never had COVID. And so we went in there. We actually went to a restaurant. And I don't know anyway if they got it there. But anyway, our risk was not the same because first and foremost, I already had it and I already had had a vaccine or finished my shots. And so we went in there with different risks. They had more risk than I did. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. The entire family got sick. They were not very, very, very sick to the point that they were hospitalized, but they were still pretty much down for days or weeks, So, and I know that they were thinking like, oh, they're probably not going to get it, because we're healthy, nothing's going to happen. But that's the thing. There's a risk, and you just have to bear the risk. And unfortunately, also, I was out with someone and I wore a mask, and this person didn't wear a mask and was holding off on getting vaccinated for some reason. I don't know that person's reason why he didn't get vaccinated. That is his personal choice. But I really felt like we went out, but we had different risks. I know that I was risking getting sick, but my risk was not as high as this person's risk. So let's say I had a risk of getting COVID, like 30% risk, 40% risk, because I had COVID and I got vaccinated, but this person had 90% risk. So that's huge risk. So if you think about it, and people don't think about it, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get COVID, but I'm going to most likely survive. Yes, you might most likely survive, but you're going to be you're going to be sick for several days, maybe even weeks, or maybe even months. And it's really up to you whether you want to risk that, not being productive and recovering, because unfortunately there's no bill protecting people when they get COVID. Like, you don't get paid. I mean, how many companies are willing to give you sick leave for like 2-3 weeks while you're out with COVID? None, so it's a risk that you have to take, and if you are okay with that risk, taking that risk, it's on you. And it's all about risk and gain. What are the risks? What are the gains? Yeah, it's because I believe that people should know how to assess risk and gain, and not. But you know what? Some people are just. I take that back. I think it's common sense right now. It's just not common sense anymore. People are not looking at things logically anymore. They're just basing their decisions on emotions. They're like, yeah, that's like, it's my right not to wear a mask or something like that. Yeah, but if there is a contaminant in the air and particulates, and I don't know, because years ago, or maybe like even before the corona, when someone had TB, tuberculosis, people followed precautions because that person is most likely infectious and can make you sick. So people wore a mask when they were with that person, and that person was isolated, and that was tuberculosis. That's a bacteria, and this is a virus. And it's a very contagious virus at that. And then if we just, go by the same logic, like, okay, someone is sick with TB, we isolate them, we wear a mask to protect ourselves. And why are we not following the same logic here? And speaking of which, it's just, people are just, I don't know, the people are not, this COVID thing, it might be with us for a while because humanity is not getting their act together. I was just watching a documentary that Australia, that they had the lockdowns last year and they didn't get the COVID, but now they have the COVID. I mean, countries are not realizing that this virus doesn't know borders. It will not follow borders. It's not like, hey, stop here. You can't go here. No, this virus is part of nature, and it will just do what it's supposed to do, which is to propagate itself. That's what viruses do. They just want to be contagious. They just want to proliferate. And they do not know borders. They don't care if you're American, Australian, Canadian. The viruses will just work, will just do their work. And humanity has to understand that. And we have to put our heads together as a globe. Like, nations should come together. Leaders should come together and like, hey, let us really look at this logically. What is working in those countries, and let's study this. Why is it working? Is vaccination the key? And is like lockdowns, like how important are lockdowns? Or is it just, instead of locking down the entire nation, maybe just locking down certain parts, and contact tracing? How important is contact tracing in quarantine? And how important is testing? So we can really defeat it if humanity just understands that we are in this together. And yes, so Australia, they kept their borders closed. They had severe lockdowns. But that can only work at a certain point. Sometimes other strategies have to work. Not sometimes. Maybe other strategies have to work. Maybe the lockdowns were only important during the first phase, which is containment, when it wasn't this far spread. But now that it's spread this far, maybe not quarantine, but contact tracing and testing, giving everybody tests will, knowing who is sick and isolating the sick people from the non-sick people, and just having that data. And of course, vaccination too. That's all important. I'm just saying that people are just very not. Humanity right now is using their emotions instead of logic. Let's look at it logically. How can we defeat something, or how can we mitigate, like, the severity? How can we make it less severe? And I'm sure there's going to be a cure for COVID eventually. They're going to have a protocol that's going to help ease with the symptoms, but that could take a while. That could be months from now, and that could be maybe even years from now. But what can we do right now? And I think world leaders should just come together and like, hey, we have to work on this together, because some countries, I'm not going to name which countries, are hoarding the vaccines. And okay, so let's say your population is vaccinated and the poor countries, they're not vaccinated, they're dying, and you're just going to let that happen. But then what if there's another type of virus that is even worse, that might not even work for the current vaccines that you have? Then what? So, maybe make vaccinations or not hoard it, but give it to certain countries that really need it, this desperate need, that their infrastructure is not holding up. Maybe give it to them. And I don't know, there's a solution here, and the solution is to look at what works and to have a plan, and to make it work for all nations, because we're in it together. We are in this together, and if we don't handle this, it's just gonna come back around, because I read in the news, and I was also watching that, so Wuhan was spared eventually, from the COVID. They got it under control, but now it has gone back. COVID is back again in their city. And this is another variant, which is the Delta variant, And then there's certain countries that are locking down severe measures. But then it just takes one person. And then what? So maybe the vaccines work, contact tracing works, isolation of certain specific people or groups of people that are sick, and maybe all of that, and testing, making testing kits. I watched this news item before. It was on the news that this company was willing to share this like testing kit. It was pretty accurate. It was like $5 the home testing kit, and then they proposed like maybe have it give it to people so that they can test themselves at home before they go out, And these sort of solutions, we have to think outside of the box, because the future of humanity is at stake. And if, in the movies, the good guys always win, but the good guys win if they work together. In all movies, superhero films, with the sequels, with a lot of sequels, the only reason why they defeat the bad guy or the baddie is because they actually cooperate with each other. They get their acts together, and then they help each other. And I don't know, I'm just ranting, but it's just so frustrating when people tell you that you're not experiencing something when you know in your heart that you went through it. And it's just that the state of denial, it's not good. People are in a state of denial. We look at it logically. What resources do we have right now? What can we do right now? And whether you want to think magically, you have magical thinking, and you think that this can just go away. If we base it on history, it's not going to go away magically. It takes time, and when people change, get their acts together, this will go away sooner. And anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope I make sense. Email me if you have any coronavirus story and what was like the most weirdest thing you encountered, with people that are in denial that this thing is real. Email me at homeofgenie@gmail.com, HOMEOF at homeofgenie, GENIE @gmail.com. Okay, and thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.